how do you like to skim?
Let me tell you, I like to skim wet.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Wet
It's
is the best.
it's so funny to me because wet skimming has always made the most sense to me, always, because once the bubble uh, is light enough to get to the top, I want it to come out. You know what I mean? I don't
Yeah.
need to have a big head of foam to show me that it's skimming.
But some
people
people might get confused to this concept.
Oh, so wet skimming is not, turning it up so a constant. Well, you tell me what you think of it, and then I'll tell you. Maybe we're talking about something else different.
When I say wet skimming in my context, I'm talking about making the skimmer do a specific thing when you are performing maintenance on your tank. What I don't mean making your skimmer run wet 24/7.
Right. Okay. Because I think there's aggressive wet skimming, which I'm actually doing as we speak and have been doing for the last 2 days, because I want to do a water change. But I might as well skim aggressively and get some more of those ickies to come out with the skim mate. And then when I normally skim, I like it to be just a little like a drip coming out of my collection cup every second or 5. Drip,
Really?
drip.
Because depending how your system's set up, you'd have to be careful with that, because you could mess with the salinity via your top off.
Of course. So you gotta but it's just like we were talking about the magic in a bottle stuff. Yeah, you gotta pay attention to your aquarium. Otherwise, stuff doesn't happen or bad stuff happens. So mine is set up that it goes into, I think it's a 3-gallon. My skim mate goes into a 3-gallon reservoir now.
Yeah.
When that gets filled up, it hits a float switch and stops the skimmer from skimming. So this is just good practice with a skimmer, I think, anyway, if you can do it. Skimmers sometimes go insane and if you've got a skimmer that's not in your sump, if it overflows, all that water goes out of your system.
Yeah.
So it's good to have a reservoir with a float switch or a sensor on it that stops the skimming at that level. And then you just pay attention to salinity. And, but my system's like 400 gallons total. So a week or so of this happening isn't going to kill anything.
No.
But every time my skim mate fills up, it stops and I get an email. And then I look at the salinity and decide, do I need to add some more saltwater top off or just let it keep topping off by itself?
You did that at a Macna. I don't remember which one it was. I was sitting next to you and you were like, hey, check this out. We were listening to someone talk. You're like, check this out. And you did your camera because your skimmer let you know it had filled up that bucket.
Yeah.
And you turned the light on and I was watching your phone with you. And then you turned the camera onto the skimmer because you visually check like, okay, yes, that is full. And then you told it to drain the bucket.
Yeah.
That also, too, your Neptune, your Apex dashboard, I was looking at it and I was like,
ridiculous.
I don't have that much shit.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
But they all do stuff. So, and, looking at somebody else's Apex dashboard and thinking you'll make sense of it is like looking in somebody else's drawer on their bedside table. It's just, there's personalized stuff in there that will make no sense to you. And you
especially yours.
Yeah. Oh man. Woo. Why are there bananas in there?
Yeah. And they're very ripe.
They have to be. That's how you make banana bread in bed, baby.
Oh,
banana bread. Baby. So yeah. So I think you normally do it like you like to use it for a water change like I'm doing right now.
Yeah. I mean, I think sometimes, it's cool in this industry how many different perspectives there are between, a maintenance company, a regular hobbyist, or a professional aquarist, like at a zoo where you would go there and be around your equipment all day long. That's your job.
Yeah.
My job is weird in that my type of clientele are not really hobbyists. They're just individuals that want something and they look at it like a live piece of art.
Yeah.
Well, so that means that mostly I'm the only one that really does much of anything to the aquariums. So, oh man, it's funny because that's the bulk of my experience in this industry, but some hobbyists trip out when they realize, like, you know, I'm around an aquarium, you know, either once a week or every other week, or if it's freshwater, once every 4 weeks. And then it's like, it just scares them that it's like, holy crap, like no one's really lording over it the rest of the time. So that determines how I set things up and how I do stuff.
Sure. But most people, you know, one of the biggest advice pieces that I see going around is, you know, keep your hands out of the tank, right? So I treat my tank very much like you're coming to see it every couple of weeks, except it's me who comes to see it. Not, you know, and it's me who gets the apex alerts and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And, you know, gone is the time where I want to dick around with a tank every day. You know what I mean? I want it to be pretty.
I mean, and that's
healthy.
fun too, because each of us, you know, the beefers watching, and me and you and everyone involved in this industry, we all have whatever it is, our level of attention that we're comfortable with giving an aquarium, and it waxes and wanes. But you know, you quickly realize in this industry, wax on, wax off,
wax, wane.
But you quickly learn with this hobby that when you don't pay attention to it, is, you know, crap goes down.
Yeah. So what's your theory? What's your theory's the wrong word because it makes people weird. I like that people have a personal philosophy of every bit of animal care that they do. So what's your philosophy behind wet skimming?
Let me go back real quick to when I was a zookeeper at the Houston Zoo.
Boy, my name is Ben. I like aqua equalizers.
I'm a little baby. I'm wearing diapers. I don't know why I turned into a redneck baby.
What other kind of baby is there?
There's only redneck babies. I don't want to say, because I know I didn't come up with this concept, but it was weird because since I don't go on forums a lot, so I do this for a living. So, you know, you have to have a break. So I've never been a big forum person. So as far as like collaborating with a bunch of other people, that didn't really happen until Facebook and social media. But I was a zookeeper at the Houston Zoo. We had I was in charge of a 4,000-gallon reef tank. We had a 12-foot tall RK2 skimmer on that tank. And what was it? Twice a month, I would have to dive in there, but they were weird. They were 5.5-foot cubes, and I'm 6'3", so I could stand up in it, but I had to put on a dry suit, and I would have to go in and like clean off hydroids and move this and mess with that and clean the, you know, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But essentially, I would storm the tank, and it was back then. We had all this equipment and chemicals, and we had this stuff from Hawaiian, I believe it's Hawaiian Marine. It was called hydrocoal, and it was kind of a slime replacement type.
Yeah.
I don't know if it had aloe vera, what it had in it, but there was one time when I got in all the tanks and stirred all the stuff up, stormed it, and got out. And I was like, man, what if I put that slimy stuff in there? It made the skimmer slime it out, and I just let it puke, and I add back water as it's puking, and, you know, pull it, because that's what, you know, you got to understand is those little chunks of detritus, they are attracted to those little air bubbles. I mean, you tell me if I'm wrong, but does not a skimmer do like a little bit of mechanical filtration kind of?
Yeah, it's a skimmer is like in between chemical and mechanical. It's like a weird, it's a little bit hard to define what exactly it is. I would call it mechanical, personally, because you're exporting something directly.
And I guess
the way it does it is the same way. It's kind of the same way, like what are the filter pads I'm thinking of that I can't remember?
Poly filter, or just bonded filter pad?
It's getting something to bind with the poly filter. You're getting something to bind with the bubbles, and then you export the bubbles, essentially.
I mean, the organic molecules that are attracted to it, it's attracted electrically, correct?
Sure.
That's what I was like. I mean, because an organic, so when a fish poops, it lets off an organic molecule. An organic molecule is a large molecule that has a hydrophobic and a hydrophilic end. One side loves water, one side hates water. So it wants to find an air-water interface. If you didn't have a skimmer, that's when you see the oily film on the top of the water, because that organic molecule, one side wants to get out of the water. So, and that's when you use a skimmer with a shit ton of little bubbles where all those organic molecules are covering those bubbles and end up as dry foam and pulled out of the tank. But invariably, if you stir up the tank, larger things that are not just organic molecules, like chunks of detritus, will invariably be pulled out as well.
Well, it can't to a certain size, right? You can't pull
tiny,
out
tiny.
Tiny little bits. So you're talking about storming the tank. In case anybody doesn't know, that's something that we talked about a whole lot in the 2000s. It isn't talked about so much anymore. I don't understand why.
You remember when it used to be turkey baster?
Yeah, you go around turkey baster or wave at at your rocks, and all that detritus then comes out. And maybe people think that with higher flow nowadays they don't need to do it the same way. But I'll tell you, man, my tank has got a lot of flow, and when I storm it, a lot of crap gets liberated. Yeah, a lot of crap gets liberated,
especially substrate.
Yeah. Well, no, for me, mostly in the rocks.
Really?
There's boundary layer effects. So there's always areas where there's almost no flow going on in your rock.
That's true.
And crop is going to build up there. And I think when you wet skim a little aggressively, you're at the very least, you're exporting more water that's got all that stormed crap in it.
Yeah.
Right. Whether or not the bubbles are getting more, it's just you're exporting the water easily because you don't have to do anything while all that crap is in the water column. So yeah.
I'll end up writing actually, that's a good thing. I'll end up writing an article on kind of how I approach it that we'll put on saltwateraquarium.com.
Our sponsor for this episode.
Our sponsor for the episode. Because I use it as a strategy when I show up. It could be the entire thing that I do. It could be part of what I do. Sometimes I don't do it at all. That would be a good show in itself, is to kind of tell people like what I do when I go to professionally clean a tank. Like,
sure,
from top to bottom, what I'm doing.
What Ben does.
Yeah. No, but it is weird because the first thing I do when I show up at a client's, and this will tie back into wet skimming, but when I show up to a client's place, the first thing I do is just walk up and observe the tank for about 5 minutes. Because how do I know what to do if I have not observed it and get a feel for pretty clean, or damn, it's got some problems, or, and then what do I do next? The observance. And then that may decide for me, like, well, do I wet skim a little bit, or I mess with the substrate, man, and a cloud of crap came out. Maybe I need to hit it with the gravel vac a little bit. Maybe I might do 3 buckets gravel vacuuming and then 1 bucket wet skim.
Maybe you'll do 2.5 buckets and then 1.5 buckets.
Maybe I'll just look at Facebook the whole time I'm there.
What other iterations of buckets could you do? Could you do 1 bucket of gravel vac and 3 buckets of wet skimming?
Dude, and we'll do a show on this. Is I'm getting to that. We'll do a show on this because some people's reliance on high technology, I get it, but I'm not exactly on that. So people love with the Neptune Apex, and they love to do the automatic water changes. I'm not feeling it.
Oh, it's so great.
I could see it, but I'm not feeling it, because to me, and I suppose it's because of what I do, but I see doing water changes as a functional thing where I'm going to go like unclog the substrate, or I'm going to remove some cyano, or it's a functional thing.
Well, it's a different thing.
Yeah.
It's just a different thing. And nobody should do anything they're not comfortable with. The automation is interesting because you have to learn it. That's why I know we've said it before, but I love this one, or I think it's important that prematurely going to automation is just going to make your reef career harder. Because
I see it all the time.
You've got to learn both things. Yeah. You've got to learn how to run your tank, and you got to learn what the automation does and how to make that work. And that's a nightmare.
Write that down, because that is a good beef, and that's
I've talked about it all the time. I've written articles about it. It's oh my God, you learn, and this came from, basic business. Don't go to accounting software until you can do the accounting on paper, because now you've got to fucking understand QuickBooks.
Yeah.
And, when you don't understand how to just keep a ledger, you're in trouble.
Sure. But let's leave that for another show, because that is a whole nother show.
Yeah, that's good stuff. So I can so when I'm doing the automatic water change, that's just to kind of give me a hedge to keep everything turning over a little bit. Yeah. I'm still looking at everything and just like now, so there's something weird going on in the other tank, in the main tank, a little bit. I also changed lights, so it could be that. But I'm like, okay, let's do a water change. Okay, if I think there's goo in the water, I'm just doing the water change over a few days, letting my skim bucket fill up, email me, then I drain it, and then I look at salinity and decide, do I add water back in now or not?
Do you go and look at which, man, I think this is important, but do you go and look at the quality of your skimmate?
Yeah, I can see on the camera too. So I can see how dirty the collection cup is.
Unpopped bubbles.
How many bubbles are sitting up there? Although usually I don't have many bubbles because I try to keep it ticking over a little bit. Okay. Also, if you skim wettish like I do, the skimmer neck doesn't get dirty as fast.
Yeah, because it's bringing it all up.
Because it's going out instead of collecting on that stuff. But I think we're the same thing. But I love the difference between us in that respect. And it's only because I've been using the controller for years and trust it now. When I first got it, I didn't trust it at all.
Yours is like a multi-day strategy?
Yeah, because I live here. If I was with you, I would definitely do it faster. I would be more hardcore because I don't live there. But here, and I know I can't screw it up, right? Or likely 99%. Because I set the skimmer. By the way, I have different virtual outlets for the skimmer. I can go 100%. I can go 60%. I can go 40%.
Because I was about to say, I forgot, because do you not have a DC pump on your skimmer?
I do. So that,
because I was thinking like electronic ball valve, but I was like, you don't have that. But no, it's the skimmer, the pump. So
it's a core pump because it works in the ecosystem I live in, right? And usually it's set around 45% power. And if I need to do a quick water change, I just hit it onto 100%. And there's a timer on that. There's a timer on that, by the way. So it'll only be on 100% for 30 minutes or so. And then it automatically goes back. So I don't screw that up.
Okay.
Or I'll just go in and tweak it. So I don't want it to be flowing out really quickly. So it's on like 52% now.
Yeah.
Then I get an email and I check it and then decide what to do.
I'm going to have Snowman, probably right about now as I'm talking, show a video of me wet skimming.
Okay.
And so you can kind of see like what the water, how fast it's coming out of the skimmer head, and then what the water looks like in another. You'll notice it's very discolored and gummy, and with tons of bubbles that are not popping, and scummy and organics laden water.
It just seems like you're getting more. We could argue you're exporting more when you do it like that. We could argue about how much more. I don't know how much more. I don't even know how we would. I
don't know how you quantify it.
That would suck. But it seems like a very strong case for it to be more. So why the hell not? Now, if there's an emergency, I'll do it the old-fashioned way and siphon out a ton of water. But
I'll tell you another thing from experience, though, and I had this just recently. I know Snowman tells us to keep everything evergreen, to not say like dated stuff.
Well, don't say the date. Just don't say the fucking date.
Don't say the fucking date.
Whatever you were about to say to date it, don't say that part. Try it.
I live in Texas. We got paralyzed by snow and ice not too long ago.
Great.
I had one tank. I had a couple tanks that were questionable, but I had one tank that completely fell on its face. Yeah. And it was one of my VIP clients, but it just, we could have a whole show on why it happened, but it just completely fell on its face. So if you're faced with a complete tank meltdown or some weird shit like that, I promise you, wet skimming is a strategy to quickly pull, unless you wanted to just wipe the slate clean and just wipe the tank out.
Well, we're also talking about, so I think we have different base assumptions about the situation. When I say if I need to get it out quick, it's because there's something toxic, something bad that's having an immediate detrimental effect to the animals. otherwise I'm just gonna, I'm not gonna siphon unless I'm doing it for a reason. I'm just gonna let the skimmer do it because I can do that by pressing buttons on the couch.
Well, it's funny because you know what, I think every advanced, whatever that is, Aquarius is, you come to learn. If you've been doing this for a long time at a high level, you come to learn that, like, hey, change things slowly. But like you just said, if there's some bad shit went down, you might not do it slowly.
Yeah. Sometimes, all these, we talked about it with Matt, I think, about recipes and things like that, but they're all the rules of thumb you're learning as a beginner reefer or intermediate reefer.
Yeah.
You learn that they're rules of thumb. They are not rules.
Yeah.
So whenever, nothing good happens fast, not really true. Not really true. When my pH was 10.7 or whatever it was, making something happen fast was good.
Yeah.
So it just goes back to your original point earlier. People, you need to have a philosophy that makes sense to you about why you're doing things. If you don't have that, you're just making stuff up on the fly, and that's not a good way to keep a crazy, stupid system like the ones we keep in our houses.
And I don't know, maybe we could have a show about that. Like, what does it mean? How do you become, like, at what time or level? Like, are you an advanced reefer? Like, do they give you a black belt or, that kind of stuff? But I just think it's when you start to get a good, when your tank looks like something that may make people go like, oh, damn. And that you have a good grasp on what's going on.
As much as I hate belts, the belt system, it's interesting. I mean, people know when you seem to know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
I don't know. There's always stuff to learn. That's the good thing though about the belt system is that, when you get, because I have 2 black belts, but when you get your black belt, it's like, okay, here, now start training for the next one. And you're just like, but I just fucking did so fuck. And then you get to the next one and it's just,
I don't do martial arts myself, but I have a couple buddies that do Brazilian jiu-jitsu. And it's funny because a lot of people will say, like, once you get to black belt, then they're like, okay, now you can start. And like, wait, what does that mean? Like, now it really starts.
But you know exactly what it means if you apply that to reef keeping.
Yeah.
You know exactly when you got your brown belt is the scariest one because that's when you think you know what you're doing. That's when a brown belt, when you spar a brown belt, that's the most dangerous person in the whole dojo to spar.
Because he's got something to prove.
They feel like they may feel that way, but they also feel like they know a bunch of stuff now and they're good now, which they are, but they're not that good now. So like all the injuries were always from a brown belt or a brown black belt in sparring, being a jackass, thinking that they knew more than they did. And I remember when I did that as a reef keeper. I'm sure you do. Remember that phase where you were like, meh, and then the next week you go, oh, that was a terrible idea. I hope nobody remembers I said that. Yeah,
and you just build on it and build on it and build on it and build on it.
But that's how it all works. There's always something to learn. There's always a reason to go back and look at the philosophy that you were using before and think, is there anything that I should jettison from that philosophy because I've learned more since then?